This is Warrick Strydom.
I have a confession to make. Every now and then I receive a gift that I don't need or want, and I will stick it in my cupboard and with the rest of my stuff, and I'll wait for somebody else's special occasion and I will re-gift it. I do that because I don't necessarily have to spend more money. The point being, sometimes my generosity actually costs me nothing. And I'm happy to admit that because I have a feeling that I'm not the only one. I think this is for all of us. I think this is you, and I think this is the person sitting next to you. And interestingly, the good news is we're not the first people to have struggled with this. Jesus was so clever that in the Gospel of Luke, he directly addresses the struggle. And so Luke, for background's sake, was a medical doctor, and he carefully investigated the life of Jesus and meticulously documented something so that we today could have more certainty and faith in the life and the teachings of Jesus. So I want to jump into the text, which is Luke chapter 21, and verse 1 says this: while Jesus was in the temple, he watched the rich people dropping their gifts in the collection box. So the temple back then was constructed in such a way that giving was a fairly public act. Okay, there were apparently around about 13 collection boxes around the room. I think I have a picture of it there. Yes, there it is. It looks something like an upside down trumpet. And you drop your money in there and it falls into a collection box at the bottom. Very public, okay? So just for some context, add insult to injury, they never had paper money back then. So it was all coins of varying sizes and weight and value. And so you can kind of join the dots. Putting your coins into that box was quite audible as well as visual. So I'm setting the scene for what's really happening here. And Jesus says that he notices these rich people in their procession dropping their gifts in. But what happens next stands in a stark contrast to what has just happened. Then in verse 2 it says, a poor widow came by and dropped in 2 small coins. Why this is so fascinating, and you should really go and read the Bible. The previous chapter, Jesus has just been berating the Pharisees and the teachers of the law for their pomp and splendor, and specifically for exploiting the poor. And he mentions widows as a category of people. So this is fascinating, because right here, in this moment, a widow walks in. So consequently, I also suspect with all of this, that this was no accident, that was the giving picture of the day. But the widow, I see the disciples cringing as the widow walks in. They've just been part of this thing. Jesus has just dressed down the religious scholars of the day. And here walks in this widow. It's like, oh no, here we go again. We're about a half an insult away from a good flogging. But it wasn't enough. Jesus next says, what he says next at least is so offensive in this context that we actually skip past it. No one saw this coming. Jesus answers a question that nobody at least was asking. Verse 3 says, I tell you the truth. This poor widow has given more than all of the rest of them. At this point, if I was one of the disciples, I pictured them going, okay, Jesus, just hang on a second. Like, you were a carpenter. I'm sure you understood proportions. Like, your fuzzy logic of less is more is really drawing a lot of attention to us. And, just recently, you've eaten with Zacchaeus, the tax collector. Then you rode into Jerusalem on a donkey. Then you rode into the temple, walked into the temple, turned over all the tables with the money changers, whip in hand, and then today you dress them all down. And here we've got this awkward moment. Can we just dial it down? Can we maybe just ease into the rest of this day? I think Jesus smiles, and the master teacher decides to explain why this lady has given more than everybody else before her. Verse 4, for they have given a tiny part of their surplus, but she, poor as she is, has given everything that she has. Translated, she is given until it hurts. She is given from her heart. She has skin in the game. I hear Jesus saying, this woman seemingly lost all she has today, but she has won my approval. Jesus' point is it's not the size of the gift, but what it costs the giver. You see, this widow knew what King David meant when he said, I won't give anything that costs me nothing. Jesus was also a mere week away from ultimately giving the greatest gift of all, his life. And so, like the widow, he knew the value of a gift is determined by what it costs the giver. So now, if you're not a Christian, or you're not a Christian anymore, that's okay. I'm happy that you're here. People like me sometimes may be the reason for that decision. And if so, I'm sorry. But it says a lot about you that you are here. And thank you. But that said, what I do know about you is your life, like mine, is complicated. Life is complicated, and we want to get it right. And you're not surrounded here by a bunch of people who have figured it out. We're all figuring this out as we go. I can't tell you how to live your life. I don't have that authority. But if you do listen to what I have to say next, I think your life could have a lot more meaning and possibly enjoyment. If you are a Christian or a Jesus follower, what I'm about to tell you is not optional. We don't get to pick and choose what it looks like to follow Jesus. And that it is just this. Jesus calls us to lifestyle impacting generosity that refreshes others, that in turn refreshes us. Let me say that again. Jesus calls us to life impacting generosity that refreshes others, as Fee has just told us, that in turn refreshes us. Eugene Peterson so beautifully paraphrases in John 3:17. He says this, God did not go to all the trouble of sending his son merely to point an accusing finger, telling the world how bad it was. He came to help, to put the world right again. Similarly, can you imagine if we, the church, would give until it hurts? When I say we, the church, I mean you and me, collectively. Less finger pointing and more generosity, as Jesus demonstrated to us. What if we lowered our standard of living so that we could refresh our communities, our families, the world? Imagine if God loves a cheerful giver became the theme of our lives instead of just a memory verse. What if for just 1 month, we all managed our money and our finances as if everything really belongs to God, like this widow did? What if? Can we imagine how much of a better place the world would be if for 1 month, in fact, what about 1 week, if we just handled our money that way? The world would be a different and a better place. So the scriptures weren't only given to us to make our individual lives better. They were given to us so that we can shine like beacons of hope into our communities, our neighborhoods, and our marketplace. Thank you.